Hello, hello mga kameta! Kamusta kayo dyan? Kamusta kayo dyan? Katulad ng pangako natin, sabi natin, balikan natin itong pelikulang Oras de Peligro, no? Pag-usapan natin na mabuti, sabi ko yung OBS natin talaga para pag-usapan na mabuti. Kahapon, andun tayo sa hometown natin, lakad-lakad tayo, nakabutan pa natin yung sunset, no? Ang ganda ng sunset talaga sa Baguio, kaya by the way, maraming salamat sa mga lahat ng mga kaibigan natin sa Baguio, especially kay cousin Anton, no, who made sure na meron tayong magandang view doon sa fireworks that officially ended yung Panagbenga season, no? Or rather Panagbenga month, no, that extended well into March. So maraming salamat sa ating cousin for giving us the opportunity to have that fantastic view. Really really appreciate it. Na-post ko yan doon sa Instagram natin. Paki-check yung Instagram natin also for other things na hindi natin pinipost dito kasi yung ating meta ay, of course, yung Facebook natin is either for podcast natin, a long conversation, or generally mga serious political discussions or bardagulan, no? But if you like more lifestyle, more contemplative, more fuego, andun sa Instagram natin. Popost pa natin yung isang video natin na talagang ganda-ganda ng yung fireworks na nangyari sa Baguio. So I'm always happy to see my hometown in its full glory. Obviously, Baguio is not what it used to be 30, 40 years ago. But let's not forget, there was a horrible, natural calamity in, 30 years ago almost. And the recovery, unfortunately, was not very good. The reconstruction was not very good. But I'm glad na yung si Mayor Benji Magalong, God bless him, give him more power, has been, doing some good things to shake things up and put Baguio back into shape, no? So thank you very much sa lahat ng mga tao na nagbigay ng fantastic time sa atin dyan sa Baguio in terms of, yung mga nakijug sa atin, mga cousin natin, sila Paolo, sila Tito Tony, lahat. And thank you rin kay kaibigan natin si Christina who just, arrived from abroad the other night. So nakipag-meeting tayo, nakapag-catch up tayo. So I really appreciate yung opportunity to also have distress, no, at saka time for rejuvenation, as well as celebrate yung ating birthday. Medyo mid-30s na yata tayo. Mga zadi na mga kameta. Pero at least medyo mas magandang lighting natin kahit zadi na tayo. Now, anyway, balikan natin itong issue ng Edsa, Ninoy, Marcos, yung mga pelikula. By the way, ipopost na natin ngayon. Actually, lalabas na dapat shortly yung aming Nexus episode podcast discussion namin with Dr. Lisandro Claudio of University of California, Berkeley. So, as some of you know, yung mga nag-eavesdrop, pinag-usapan namin na mabuti ang legacy ni Ninoy, yung kanyang rivalry with yung kabrad niya from the Upsilon, di ba? Kabrad niya na si Marcos Sr. We also talk about sibling rivalry, which, by the way, was the core theme of two articles I published today. One for the Philippine Daily Inquirer, Marcos's sibling rivalry, question mark, and then the other one that is, I suppose it's out right now by Asia Times, which looks at mga kameta, yung sibling rivalry at impact niya doon sa ating foreign policy, no? Because Senator Amy Marcos has been very staunchly critical or at the very least skeptical doon sa EDCA expansion plan ng kanyang kapatid, and she's worried that we can get dragged into the Taiwan crisis. It's a kind of rhetoric or position that is very similar or hews much closer to the position of the previous administration and the supporters of the previous administration, not to mention the impresarios of the previous administration. Nabalita natin na imbitado pa yung isang impresario bilang eksperto doon sa Senate committee hearings ng isang araw. Anyways, hindi natin na-confirm. But yun yung konteksto mga kameta, no? Yun po ang konteksto ng mga pinag-usapan natin. So tomorrow, let's talk about more these dynamics, Bongbong, Aimee, Philippine foreign policy. So please check yung ating column na Philippine Daily Inquirer at saka yung article natin ng Asia Times. Check natin kung lumabas yan. So, alam mo naman tayo mga kameta, bago pa lang magbiyahe, trabaho muna, tapos biyahe. Ganun talaga, intense talaga yung work natin. Kanina rin, nasa UP tayo. Kasama natin yung mga colleagues natin sa UP for some very interesting forum na meron kami sa UP. Kaya ngayon lang ako nakahabol. I'm gonna also get out kind of a full transcript hopefully ng yung interview natin with Ambassador Romualdez. We had a fantastic really exchanges. I really appreciate that, and I look forward to having exchanges of that sort, no, comprehensive, in-depth, objective, post-partisan, non-partisan, with other senior officials in the government and other people who care about the country and the people that I deeply respect, I genuinely respect. So over the past year, may mga na-interview tayo ng mga cabinet ministers, I think three at least, and then now we have very senior diplomats, one of the chief architects of our foreign policy. So hopefully we're gonna have more of that. To be honest, mga kameta, tonight actually we were supposed to have a podcast edition with my friend Dr. Joseph Scalis or Scalici. Marunong siya magtagalog, mas magaling pa siya magtagalog or Pilipino sa atin. Please check his TikToks, fantastic. He's I think now based in London School of Economics. But we had to make some slight adjustments because he's gonna be on the way on the road again. So later this week, abangan nyo yung interview namin with Joseph Scalis. He has a new book, a fantastic book. He's one of the authorities now. He got his PhD from UC Berkeley, similar to Lelo. He has also affiliation with Berkeley. He wrote a lot about the Philippine left, no? And he wrote also very interesting things about how Marcos Sr. was reaching out to the Soviet Union and how he leveraged yung kanyang ties with the Party Comunista ng Pilipinas to create diplomatic channels, no? With the other side of the Cold War back then, which, by the way, was also part of our discussion with Ambassador Romualdez when we talk about how the father's foreign policy legacy shapes the sons, no? So, pag-usapan natin naman po yan tomorrow. Now, let me go back again dito sa pelikulang Oras de Peligro, mga kameta. Okay. So, there are at least 5 things I want to say here. First of all is, I hope I get this right, no? First of all, I really like the acting of Cherry Pie Picache. Picache? Is that correct? Is that how to pronounce it? Pasensya, hindi tayo showbiz. Well, in fairness, she's really a good actress. She was definitely the pivot of the whole plot. And one of the fascinating things about her, again, spoiler alert, but not too much spoiler, she's also a reflection of the arc of political radicalization. No? So naturally, there are many people out there, especially women, who are very responsible. They care about their family. They tend to be more apolitical because they're concerned primarily is yung welfare ng kanilang pamilya. So this is a movie about how completely apolitical people, or people who don't want to get involved in politics and who don't want their loved ones to get involved in politics, how they become radicalized, or how they become more politically conscious and active citizens in response to how the big politics picture affects their personal lives. So what I found fascinating about this movie, is that it shows not only how the personal is political, but how the political can also get very personal. So it's this kind of a dialectical interaction between the personal and the political that I appreciate. And right off the bat, in the first minutes pa lang ng movie, makikita mo yung dynamic na sinasabi natin dito sa Oras de Peligro. The second thing I appreciate also with this movie is that it uses judiciously, no, yung mga documentary footages from the final days of the Marcos dictatorship. Now, nakita natin dun sa Made in Malacanang na there were efforts to kind of draw on documentary footages to give a semblance of historical authenticity or historical accuracy. But you get the more complete picture dito. So I think very judicious at maayos yung drawing on actual historical footages to help us appreciate the drama of the moment. I mean, there were times that I actually got a little bit emotional, and like I could feel the intensity. I could feel the zeitgeist, the spirit of the time, the anger, the frustration, the anticipation of political transformation and change, the anxieties, the confusions, the uncertainty, and then of course a lot of people, opportunistic people, who were trying to make the most out of the uncertainty to protect their own interests or escape accountability, and in some cases also people surviving, abusive officials or opportunist people. Now, which brings me to the number three issue that I appreciate about the movie, mga kameta, is that what I like about the movie is also how it gives us an idea about how yung mga malalim na problema na meron tayo ngayon. For instance, lack of rule of law, absence of rule of law, problems with extrajudicial killings, problems of abuse of authority, problems with corruption, a lot of that can be traced back to the dictatorship days. I mean, you could see gaano kakalat at sabog yung bureaucracy, no? You could see how corrupt some of the police forces were back then. You could see how abusive they were. You could see how they were treated people like, subjects of a medieval king, if not worse, no? And unfortunately, we see that culture of impunity uh, surviving way into the 21st century right now. No, we're already in the third decade of the 21st century, andyan pa rin. So, 40 years on almost, maraming mga maraming problema na nakita natin about yung time na yan ay nagpe-persist hanggang ngayon, no? So, this tells you how deep the roots of the problem are, but this also tells you about the shortcomings of the post-Marcosian regime to deal with the root cause of the problem, yung absence of rule of law, yung impunity, etc., which of course culminates into a kind of a really crazy drug war under the former tatay, no? And this actually reminds me, mga kameta, dun sa isang discussion ko with Attorney Joke, no, remember, because with Attorney Joke we discussed the issue of accountability, we discussed the issue of bakit walang na-punish talaga dun sa mga abuses before and all, and he said something about kind of like the deep state in the Philippines, no, the security services, people working in the judiciary, among others, who persisted into the post Marcos regime, and they had their proteges, they had their networks, etc. So there was clearly not a major break in many ways, which brings me to issue number 4 that I appreciate about this movie. The fourth thing, mga kameta, is this. If you look at the thing about the movie is that there's clearly a tension there. You can see the tension between a narrative that emphasizes the desperate need for progressive radical change. And in fact, some of the key figures there, again, I'm not gonna do super spoiler there, some of the key figures there ay kasama sa mga kilosan, no? Progressive movements. Some of them even more radical. And then sa isang banda, you see some people who are involved with the yellow movement. And then you clearly can see the class divides. You can clearly also see that while yung mga nasa kilusan, they wanted total transformation of the Philippine society. Meaning, hindi lang yung palitan yung diktador sa isang more democratic political system, but also palitan yung feudal na sistema ng Pilipinas. Magkakaroon ng tunay na pagbabago pagdating sa socio-economic justice situation, pagdating dun sa kalagayan ng ating mga kababayan, no? So, you can see these tensions whereby on one hand, there's this character, again, I don't want to do spoiler, kilala yung character, like she represents this elite, reformist, yellow person who's happy to see the change of government and have someone like Cordain, but clearly these are not necessarily people who are completely comfortable with total transformation of the society. At the same time, I like how Joel Lamangan did not demonize them, because usually the demonization of yellow happens also from the far left as much as from the far right, diba? I like that there was no such thing, because the epitome of the reformist yellow elite person there actually also was genuinely compassionate. No, she would be there to help out the poor. Again, I'm not going to do spoiler, but you can see it there. So I like that kind of a nuance, that tension there in the script, that kind of nuanced picture. But I don't know, my sense is if sana my voiceover, like someone is narrating it, or siguro kung naging libro yan, mas maganda. Parang, I don't know, I'm not sure what was Joel Lamangan trying to do there exactly. Was he trying to just leave it to us to make the judgment on our own, which is my sense so far, or that's how I read it? Or is it because he didn't want to push the narrative far enough, which is, okay, we see the effort of Cory support, especially this elite, titas of Manila kind of people, but you can see it, and hindi siya resolved. It's just left there hanging, no? So it's an ambivalent, situation, but of course it has its own value. That ambivalence has its own value. But my sense, a part of me wanted siguro for director Joel Lamang to just go all the way and spell it out. That okay, there are well-meaning people out there, but I'm not sure these people wanted true revolution, true transformation, total transformation of the system. And in fact, you can make an argument that that's precisely what's the problem with the regime that replaces Marcos. It was a regime that replaces Marcos but doesn't replace a feudalistic system. It doesn't really transform the socio-economic conditions of many, many Filipinos, right? Now, maybe that's gonna be for another movie. Maybe masyadong mahaba siya. I can see that Joel Laman wanted to more focus also on the personal aspect of the story, etc. Pero yun nga eh, there are a lot of parts where he talks about yung mga iba't ibang kilusan, yung problem dun sa ating lack of land reform, dun sa mga oppressive conditions para sa ating mga yung ating mga kababayan na magsasaka. At the same time, it also shows urban poverty, the difficult condition for sa atin, for a lot of our kababayans. And then it shows, like, you know, the yellow lady there in a very comfortable situation. So, you know, but it's left hanging there. So I don't know if that was intentional or that was because Joel didn't want to push the argument far enough. All right? Okay, so konting spoiler alert. I'm not even giving names and all of that, para, you know, you can watch it. And then number 5 thing that I appreciate is that the movie is kind of an in-your-face debunking of any kind of nonsensical claims that was a golden era. Very clearly, mga kameta, by 1980 to 1983, the Philippines was already an insolvent country. So let's get to the facts, okay? Let's be very clear about that. The Philippines was not Singapore by the 1980s. It was more like almost a sub-Saharan Africa level country, broken Latin American country, among the poorest in Asia and in the world, no? So, i-post natin. Of course, everything we do is based on facts, mga kameta, so you can check it on your own. You could see naman talaga how... Now, I think JC po ng Bayan Fairness has done some interesting work on this. But anyways, let's look at international outlets, etc. I want to say it because, you know, ayoko yung may mga nagko-comment dyan na naman na walang alam. So, let's get this clear. So, I suggest you guys check, for instance, itong report by Washington Post. Dito lang yan, Meta. That clearly shows, you know, the Philippines was really in dire straits. And makikita mo talaga yung mga tao sa streets, etc., you know, they were barely middle class. You could see that, you know, many people were really facing super, super tough economic conditions back then. That, you know, the Philippines, the political crisis in the Philippines could not be separated from the economic crisis in the Philippines. So I really checked this article written in 1983. In fact, the Philippines would ask help from the international financial institutions. This is 1984. So 1983, 1984, really the Philippines is in big trouble. So the Philippines asked for, you know, we had a $25 billion debt back then, no? At unfortunately, na-inherit natin yung debt na yan in some way or another. We're still paying it until 2025 based on certain studies. So again, you can see this. So 1983, 1994, it's not only a time of massive political crisis, it's also a time of really, really serious economic crisis. So the Philippines by now is really begging for help from international community because more or less bankrupt yung country natin, no? Now, if you still don't believe it, bahala kayo kung ayaw nyo mag-research, no? Ito, di ba, remember guys, pinakita ko sa inyo yan. So, just
after a hard day's work, it's hard to eat healthy. But for me, it gets easy.
Gotta work or believe.
Okay, so this is an interesting one. I like to post it here, mga kameta, para makita niyo talaga yan. Let's be very clear about the data here.
This is beef in all its majesty. The only flame-grilled burger, Burger King Whopper.
Sorry,
New Tang na mas pinasiksik sa vitamin C, D, and zinc.
Wait lang.
I feel nauseous, believe me. Never had a lot of shit come easy. Had to work hard, struggle just to be me. Had to rise up just so they could see me. Did what I had to do just to feed me. And what was left over I put towards my dreaming. But the only thing in life that has meaning are the things you gotta work for, believe me. Taking into your hands a plan. Your own hands can land your own brand. And damn, I feel like no one takes accountability. They want the credibility, convincingly unwilling to put in the fucking hours it takes to get some power. Don't be fucking sour, take a cold shower, scream until you're louder, work until you're prouder, and fuck all the doubters. They're just fucking downers. I swear to God they all let.
Wait lang mga kameta. I want to remove that kasi baka magkaroon tayo ng problema sa sounds and copyrights and all. But anyway, I'll post sa baba na lang mga kameta. You can just check it on your own how the Philippines would really, really be left behind by late 1970s to early 1980s. Talagang pag-iwanan tayo ng lahat. And clearly, so this was not a golden era. So that's the other thing I appreciate, that it really showed how dire the economic situation was for a lot of Filipinos. And in fact, a part of me, not naman to be too skeptical, but a part of me feels mga kameta, how should I put it? A part of me feels mga kameta na, had it not been for the economic crisis in 1983, 1984, 1995, the Marcos regime would have had still a lot of room for maneuver. So I think it's the confluence of yung economic crisis and the political crisis, especially after the assassination of Benigno Aquino, that really, really did it. No? Really did it. The last thing I want to say about the movie is that it also makes you feel sayang. Sayang in a sense that we had this revolutionary moment. We had really this opportunity to really change the conditions for vast majority of our kababayans, no? And yet talaga, and yet for some reason, those who came after Marcos either lacked the political capital, the political imagination, or or combination of both to truly change the situation for, you know, yung mga pinaka-vulnerable members of our society and all of that. So, what I like about the movie is that it provides you an opportunity for serious retrospective. Like, okay, let's say indeed the conditions were desperate back then. Indeed, people were desperate for change. But 40 years on, or rather 30 years on before Tatay, how transformative has been the post-Marcosian political system for ordinary Filipinos, the vast majority of Filipinos. Now, in fairness naman, not to be unfair mga kametan, in fairness naman, the Philippine middle class is far bigger than it was before, during the Marcos era. The per capita income of the Philippines has multiplied by 5 times or more at least, despite rapid population growth. But still, we should have done way better than how we have performed in the past 3 or 4 decades. And that really asks you a question, saan tayo nagkakulang? Nonetheless, the movie also reminds you that you can say whatever you want about saan nagkakulang yung mga iba't ibang presidente natin over the past 2-3 decades. But let's not forget the original scene. Let's not forget how we started, not from +10. We didn't start from golden era in 1987. No, we started from -10, right? And the question is how far we have come from -10. Obviously, we're above 0, but we could have been 50 or 100 by now if we had more imaginative leaders, more aggressive transformation of the society, if we have better land reform, if we had a constitution that made really sure that political dynasties would not proliferate, if we had a constitution that made really sure that the Philippines had real land reform, if we had a constitution that made really sure that we have a strong state institutions, we properly regulate the markets, we make sure na hindi yung mga oligarchs mag-take over our economy, and we had a constitution that provided the parameters for the development of real political parties para magkaroon tayo ng totoong politika, hindi yung dynastic politics at personalan, no? Sinong mo dyan? Sinong favorite dynasty mo dyan? Yun yung naging condition natin over the past few decades. It's not like that was not the case before, but clearly we could have made a far, far bigger and more decisive break from the actual conditions we're saying back then. Now, the other thing also, as I said, pinag-usapan din natin yung kahapon, the other thing I really also appreciate about this movie, mga kameta, is it also showed how important the defections within the elite ranks was to the success of EDSA. It is true that Ninoy's assassination played a big role in setting in motion a series of events that culminated in EDSA. But one of those big events, mga kameta, was Ramos and Enrile defecting from the regime. So the regime was so bankrupt and it was such a mess that the defense minister, the top general, relatives, no, people related to the president were defecting by now. Now, if you watch Made in Marites, it will give you a different version of alternative universe. But But the reality by this time, the situation was so dire that even the U.S. gave up on its favorite ally, one of the favorite allies in Southeast Asia. Marcos was a top U.S. ally. Let's not forget about it, right? I said my piece already on his foreign policy. I don't think it was so bad, but clearly he was a U.S. ally. So he became a liability by the 1980s. That's why, and yet, you see, he was such an ally for U.S. that U.S. Made sure na he safely can get out of the country at hindi sila French Revolution, etc. That's very important. But the defection within the military ranks was really, really crucial. In fact, historians call EDSA a civilian-backed coup because the EDSA could not have happened if the military coup didn't happen first, and then people came out and supporting the coup by Ramos and Enrile, right? And there also you can see how politicized the armed forces of the Philippines were back then. So the question is how far the armed forces of the Philippines has come in terms of professionalization over the past 3 or 4 decades. I'm far more optimistic, and I think, in fairness, AFP has come, really in a good direction over the past 3 or 4 decades in ways that the PNP has to still catch up on that, no? Okay, mga kameta. I hope hindi tayo we can just again, I think JC has done really good job of showing the economic conditions back then, but my sources were ever since different, so I'm glad at least there are people there who are dedicated to making sure any dire economic conditions back then. So definitely it was not a golden era, economically speaking, and definitely politically the situation was so dire, mga kameta, that even the top supporters of the regime, cousins of the president, in fact, relatives of the president, people are very close to him, his fellow Ilocanos, were defecting from him. Right? That's how bad the situation was. So, I always say, tama, nagkakulang yung mga presidente natin in recent memory, including si Tatay, ang dami niyang pangako, ano nangyari? Singapore na ba tayo or what? But let's not forget the original sin and how a lot of the problems we face today can be traced back to that year, to those era. Now, obviously, to be also fair historical, it's not like the Philippines was a consolidated, clean, effective, functional democracy when martial law was declared, right? By mid-1960s, the Philippines was already in trouble. But that's another topic, and dun sa Nexus namin with Leloy Claudio, we discussed about the problems the Philippines has been facing over time and the trajectory of its foreign policy and domestic economic conditions. We'll talk more about that, mga kameta. But in the meantime, I just want to keep it here. Sorry, I'm a political thinker, so there's no way I'm just gonna analyze this movie on its own terms alone. But I want to analyze it. I tend to analyze things based on my understanding of history and politics. What's the relevant message there? But let me end on this note. Medyo nakakalungkot na, you go to the cinema a week into the showing, it seems not as, maybe because nasa Solid North ako, so suppose. But I didn't see as many people there as you would have expected for a movie as historically relevant and truth-driven as this, no? So that tells you a lot about yung kakulangan natin pagdating sa ating basic education, yung kakulangan natin in terms of inculcating a sense of history, proper sense of history, a sense of respect for history, a sense of respect for our own recent past. Because as I said, and as Rizal would always say, kung, you're not familiar, if you don't appreciate your past, especially the recent past, how are you going to get the future right, So otherwise, we're just going to be stuck in this medieval cycle of going from one trapo to another semi-trapo and then not so trapo and then trapo again. I was like, when are we going to get out of this cycle, right? And we can only get out of this cycle if we properly understand history, we learn the right lessons, and move it from there, mga kameta. So there it goes, mga kameta. Again, a very basic overview of the movie and its political relevance. And I will write also a column on this more in detail. Pag-usapan natin ulit yan, especially about siguro where the movie could have been even better. Or for me kasi, there's just so much you can put in a single movie. So I want to be fair, diba? And there's just so much you can do with one movie of 1 hour and a half or so. Although medyo mahaba pa rin yung movie. But I hope this will be just the beginning of a new genre. That's what I said about Katips, no? Ni Vince Tanyada. I felt there were maraming mga kulang, maraming pwedeng ayusin. But at least it was the beginning of something new. So I'm glad that over the past year or so, we're seeing a lot of these movies that are relevant to our historical consciousness, or at least relevant to making us more interested in history. So my reading is, perhaps this is not Joel Lamangan's last say on the matter. And hopefully this is part of a bigger genre of solid historical movies about the Philippines. So congratulations to Joel Lamangan and the cast of the movie Oras, Peligro, and may this be the beginning of more serious engagement with our history in an artistic way, and hopefully in ways that even better appeals to the masses and the vast majority of people. But as I said, this has to go, mga kameta, hand in hand with really revamping of our educational system, because so long as the educational system is broken, so long as the educational system is not inculcating the right sense of history and respect for facts and right understanding of how politics operates, where we went wrong and where we can get right, where we can go right, and who is right, and what kind of leaders we need, what kind of political system we need, then magkakaproblema tayo. There's just so much that one movie can do. But hopefully this movie is one good step in the right direction. I think Katips was also one good step in the right direction. So despite all the shortcomings and all of these endeavors, I think they're brave and courageous step, right, towards, or as part of a broader arc of defending truth and preserving historical memory and our fidelity to actual facts, actual realities back then. So maraming salamat again, and congratulations to Joel Lamangan and the cast of the movie for the effort, for the energy, for the compassion, for devotion. You could really see the actors were really into it, and they really, really believed in what they were doing. They were not just actors, they really believed in what they were doing. So congratulations for that. By the way, balikan ko rin, panoorin natin yung Made in Marites 2.0, or whatever, Made in Malakayan 2.0, whatever is next. Tignan din natin yan, and I'll try to be, as always, as fair as possible, because there's the artistic side we have to appreciate as it is, and there's the political side that we can interrogate. Alright? Maraming salamat. Thank you very much, and talk to you soon.